Greetings from the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Non-Public Education, or ONPE as we say. Thank you for joining us today on this session on federal education program updates and educational studies and statistics that include private and Catholic schools. My name is Maureen Dowling, and I'm the Director of the Office of Non-Public Education. Joining me today is my colleague, Pamela Allen, who is ONPE's Education Program Specialist. We'd like to begin by expressing appreciation for all the tremendous work and sacrifices you have made over the past year and a half and continue to make in order to overcome the challenges of COVID-19 as you seek to educate your students in safe, welcoming, and nurturing environments. We have been impressed and inspired by your dedication, your commitment, creativity, and ability to pivot successfully to educating our nation's youth, notwithstanding these challenges. It is our privilege to present to you today and to provide information and helpful resources regarding federal education programs that are available to students, teachers, and leaders in Catholic schools. We'll also share information about some of the U.S. Department of Education studies that provide data about Catholic and other private schools in America. Now, let me pass to Pamela, who will provide an overview of the agenda for today's session.
Thanks so much, Maureen. I echo your gratitude to all the Catholic school stakeholders joining us today. We hope that you find the information we share with you helpful as you consider the possibilities for the future. Well, now let's take a minute to review today's agenda. We'll start with some background information about ONPE and then provide a high-level overview of the Equitable Services provisions of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, also known as ESEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, known as IDEA, and the COVID-19 relief programs and resources. And we'll also share a little bit about the Blue Ribbon Schools program, the Ed Green Ribbon Schools program, Readiness and Emergency Management for Schools, teacher loan forgiveness and cancellation programs, and we'll share some statistics and studies from the National Center for Educational Statistics.
As the department's liaison office, ONPE has a positive and long-standing relationship with the National Catholic Educational Association, as well as with numerous other national, state, and local private school organizations. We appreciate the role private schools have in educating our nation's youth and the value you place on your independence and autonomy to pursue your unique missions and pedagogies. Since the initial passage of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act in 1965, private school students and teachers have been eligible to participate in certain federal education programs. And in 1978, Congress statutorily established ONP and gave us the mission of fostering maximum participation of non-public school students and teachers in federal education programs and initiatives. So how do we realize this mission? Well, ONP realizes its mission by serving as the department's liaison to the non-public school community, providing advice and guidance on all matters affecting non-public school education and the participation of private school students and teachers in federal education programs and initiatives, communicating with and providing technical assistance to non-public school officials, parents, and representatives of state and local educational agencies regarding equitable participation in department programs and initiatives, providing a vehicle for the non-public school community to communicate its interests and needs and requests to the department, convening meetings and conference calls with the non-public school community and department leadership to address topics of interest and concern, providing information on state education options and regulation of private schools, collaborating with various offices on programs of interest, and to facilitate technical assistance, webinars, presentations, guidance, and the resolution of problems at the state and local levels regarding the implementation of equitable services.
Before we get too far into today's session, let's review OMPE's homepage on ed.gov, which is the U.S. Department of Education's website. The ONPE homepage contains numerous links to resources for non-public schools, such as laws and regulations, guidance, programs in which private schools can participate, non-public school statistics, and a list of national non-public school organizations, to name a few. We also include a link to the ESEA Ombudsman Corner that houses a directory ombudsman, which are state contacts for programs authorized under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Additionally, on this page is a link to join the ONPE listserv, and we encourage you to subscribe to that so that you can receive timely information about topics related to federal education programs and the participation of private school students and teachers.
Thanks, Pamela. Now that you know where to find information on federal education programs and initiatives related to non-public schools, let's talk about the Equitable Services provisions under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, known as ESEA. Since the enactment of ESEA in 1965, the law has required local educational agencies, or LEAs, to provide equitable services to private school students, teachers, and in some cases, parents in numerous ESEA programs. This was based on the child benefit principle, meaning, in short, ESEA programs benefit children as opposed to schools, and if a child is eligible, he or she is entitled to receive program services. Under the ESEA, there are 8 major programs that require the equitable participation of private school students and teachers, and in some cases, their families. Equitable services may be provided in the form of direct services to eligible students, teachers, and in some cases, parents. Services may include, for example, support for academically at-risk students and English learners, professional development for teachers, and readiness and emergency management for schools. It's important to note that equitable services are not provided in the form of money to the private schools. Rather, equitable services are provided through the LEA in the form of direct services to eligible students, teachers, and in some cases, parents. Often, ESEA programs are identified by their title, such as Title I. If your school is interested in any of the programs listed on this slide, but has not been contacted by the LEA or local public school district to conduct consultation, we recommend that the school's principal or headmaster contact the LEA official responsible for the program's administration to request information about these programs and schedule a consultation meeting. Should you need assistance at the state level, the ESEA State Ombudsman is a designated state official who is required to monitor and enforce each public school district's implementation of the equitable services requirements. This individual can assist you if you encounter challenges at the local level. To find the Ombudsman in your state, visit the Ombudsman directory on the ONPE webpage. There are several key points to highlight related to the LEA's responsibility to provide for the equitable participation of eligible stakeholders under ESEA. The LEA must provide services that address the needs of private school students, teachers, and parents, equitable to those provided to public school students, teachers, and parents. Also, the LEA is responsible for administering the program, and it must remain in control of the program funds. It must conduct timely and meaningful consultation with private school officials. It must ensure that expenditures are equal on a per pupil basis to the expenditures for participating public school children, taking into account the education needs and number of students to be served. It must provide services that are secular, neutral, and non-ideological, and that supplement, not supplant, the services and programs that the private school provides for its students and teachers absent the federal services. The LEA must also assess and evaluate the services provided to assure that they meet the needs of the population served. Let's dig a little deeper into timely and meaningful consultation under the ESEA as it is essential to ensuring that the equitable services provisions are administered as intended by law. The consultation process between public and private school officials should result in a program designed to meet the education needs of eligible program participants. Consultation should be entered into with the goal of reaching agreement, as the law states. In addition, each LEA must maintain in the agency's records and provide to the ESEA involved a written affirmation signed by officials of each participating private school that meaningful consultation has occurred. Consultation must include meetings between LEA officials and appropriate private school officials and must occur before the LEA officials make any decisions that affects the opportunity for eligible program stakeholders to participate. In addition, consultation must occur in a timely and meaningful manner during the design, development, and implementation of the program. Timely and meaningful consultation between the LEA and private school officials during the design and development of the services is required on the following issues. How student needs will be identified, what services will be offered, the amount of funds available for services and how that was determined, how and when decisions about the delivery of services will be made, how, where, and by whom services will be provided, and how services will be assessed and improved based on assessment results. The size and scope of services needs to be discussed. The proportion of funds allocated for services under Title I, the method for determining poverty for Title I services, and also whether a third-party contractor will be used, and whether funds will be pooled for services. It's important to remember that the LEA officials make the final decisions regarding the provision of services after consultation has occurred. At the same time, if an LEA disagrees with the views of the private school officials on the provision of services through a contract, the LEA must provide in writing to such private school officials the reasons why the LEA has chosen not to use a contractor. That wraps up the information about the ESEA. Pamela, would you now speak to the Individuals with Disabilities Education requirements?
Oh, I'm happy to do so, Maureen. IDEA is the federal law that ensures that all children with disabilities receive a free, appropriate public education, which is also known as FAPE. The IDEA requires that LEAs provide benefits and services to eligible children with disabilities in public schools, as well as in private schools, including those in religious schools. However, when a parent chooses to enroll their child with a disability in a private school, when the question of FAPE is not at issue, the LEA's responsibility will differ from its responsibility to serve public school students. This is because parentally placed private school children with disabilities do not receive FAPE. That said, under IDEA, LEAs have an obligation to ensure that parentally placed children have an opportunity to equitably participate in the services funded with federal Part B funds. And in doing so, LEAs must engage in timely and meaningful consultation with representatives of private schools and representatives of parents of parentally placed children with disabilities before they make any decisions that will impact the participation of such children. Public school districts have an obligation to make services available to the population of private school students with disabilities located within their geographical boundaries based on the proportionate share calculation. And ONPE has created a number of resources to help clarify the IDEA requirements, including the booklet pictured here, which specifically addresses these requirements. The booklet's content is available on ONPE's website, and it's available for download in PDF version as well. Now let's address the basic requirements for the provision of equitable services under IDEA. Public school districts, or LEAs, have an obligation to make special education and related services available to the population of eligible parentally placed children with disabilities located in their geographical boundaries based on the proportionate share calculation. And to do this, they must first identify the eligible children through the child find process. The child find is the process by which an LEA assesses children to determine if they are eligible children with disabilities under IDEA and meet the eligibility requirements of the law. The LEA then counts the eligible children and uses that number to calculate the proportionate share of federal IDEA Part B funds. The proportionate share is then expended on the special education and related services for eligible children with disabilities enrolled by their parents in private schools. It is important to note that timely and meaningful consultation must occur before any decisions are made that will affect the participation of children with disabilities enrolled by their parents in private schools and IDEA Part B programs. Thus, decisions about services may not be made in advance or in absence of timely and meaningful consultation. It's only after timely and meaningful consultation has occurred with the representatives of the private schools and representatives of parents of parentally placed children with disability, the LEA is responsible for making decisions about the aspects of services to be provided. Let's dig a little deeper into the IDEA consultation requirements. Each LEA, or if appropriate, an ESEA, must consult in a timely and meaningful way with representatives from two stakeholder groups, private school officials and parents of parentally placed children with disabilities. First thing they need to discuss is the matter of child find, and recall that this is the process of identifying children with disabilities to determine if they're eligible for IDEA services. The LEA has to engage in consultation about how parentally placed children with suspected of having disabilities can participate equitably, and they also need to discuss how parents, teachers, and private school officials will be informed of the child find process. Additionally, the LEA must also discuss the amount available for services and how they will calculate the proportionate share of federal funds available. Another required topic of consultation is the consultation process itself, which is a mandatory and ongoing process. And they must discuss how that consultation process will operate throughout the school year to ensure that children who are identified through the child find process and selected to receive services can meaningfully participate in IDEA programs. Additionally, the child find process is important to ensure that the equitable services are provided as intended by law. And with that in mind, the LEA must also discuss how, where, and by whom special education related services will be provided, including a discussion of types of services, including direct services and alternate service delivery mechanisms, as well as how the services will be apportioned if funds are insufficient to serve all children, and how and when those decisions will be made. Finally, sometimes there will be disagreement about equitable services. As such, if an LEA representatives disagree with the views of the private school officials on the provision of services or the types of services, whether provided directly or through a contract, the LEA must provide to the private school officials a written explanation of the reasons why the LEA chose not to adopt the recommendations of the private school officials. And it's important to note that a unilateral offer of services by an LEA with no opportunity for discussion is not adequate consultation, as such an offer does not meet the basic requirements of the consultation process. Only after discussing key issues relating to the provision of special education and related services with the consultation representatives may an LEA make its final decisions with respect to the services to be provided to such children. That finishes up the overview of IDEA. So I'm wondering, Maureen, would you please speak a little bit about school choice and equitable participation?
Thanks, Pamela. Given all the information we've just shared, our audience might be wondering about how school choice programs in various states and cities might impact their ability to participate in ESEA and IDEA programs. It's important to note that participation in a federal or state private school choice program does not affect a private school student's eligibility for equitable services under ESEA or IDEA. Like other private school students, a student is eligible for equitable services if the student meets the eligibility requirements for the program. Now we'll shift gears a bit to the COVID-19 programs administered by the U.S. Department of Education. and talk about the resources available for states, communities, educators, and families. These resources include guidance and policies related to elementary and secondary education, special education, post-secondary education, and other aspects of lifelong learning. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention also continue to provide updated guidance for school settings. There are 3 major programs that provide services to non-public school students and teachers, including the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES Act, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act 2021 Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools Program, and the American Rescue Plan Act Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools Program. We trust that many Catholic schools have received services and assistance under these programs. These resources are located on the department's coronavirus webpage at www.ed.gov/coronavirus. Guidance and frequently asked questions about these programs are also available on this website. Should you have additional questions, though, about these programs and resources, please don't hesitate to contact and reach out to ONPE directly.
One of the programs that private schools may participate is the National Blue Ribbon Schools Program. And this program was established in 1982 to recognize the hard work of school communities in establishing and creating safe and welcoming schools where students master challenging content. Private schools that meet the criteria of exemplary high-performing schools can apply to be nominated. And high-performing means that the achievement of the school students in the most recent year tested places the school in the top 15 in the nation in reading or language arts and mathematics as measured by a nationally normed test, or in the top 15% of its state as measured by a state's test. If a private school administers both state tests and nationally normed tests, the school must be in the top 15% in both. And for high schools, the graduation rate must be 95% or higher in the most recent year. The Council for American Private Education administers the Blue Ribbon Schools program on behalf of the department and nominates up to 50 private schools each year. For private schools, the application process starts with CAPE in October, and then CAPE submits formal nominations of schools in January, and final applications are due to the department in February. And the Secretary of Education announces the recipients in September of each year, and schools are invited to attend an award ceremony in Washington, D.C. that fall. So be sure to visit CAPE's website at www.capenet.org for additional details and deadlines.
Another program available to private schools in the United States is the U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon Schools Program. The goal of this program is to inspire schools to be resource efficient, promote safe and healthy communities, and provide environmental and sustainability education to students. Since the first year of the award in 2012, many private schools have been recognized as U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon awardees to highlight their exemplary practices and achievements in the 3 pillars. Schools must be nominated by their state agency to be a U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon School. Details regarding application requirements are located on the program website included in the slide.
So the department funds the Readiness and Emergency Management for Schools Technical Assistance Center, known as REMS TA Center, which supports schools, both public and private, school districts and institutes of higher education with their community partners in the development of high-quality emergency operations plans, or EOPs, and comprehensive emergency management planning efforts. And the REMS TA Center offers resources to address a wide variety of situations, such as natural disasters, epidemics, dating violence, even lead poisoning. So they offer live and archived webinar trainings, PowerPoint presentations for download, and courses that are available for self-paced individual learning. And all of this is free to use, including the on-site trainings, which are available by request for delivery on-site at your schools. The REMS TA Center staff are available to respond to direct requests for technical assistance or on a variety of topics pertaining to emergency operations planning for schools. They also have interactive emergency management planning tools available through the center that include online self-assessments and evaluation tools designed to evaluate the school's capacity to create a high-quality EOP, as well as software tools designed to help guide users through the process of developing such plans. There's even a virtual community of practice for representatives from schools, school districts, IHEs, and their community partners to collaborate on special projects, share news and resources, and discuss trends and ideas, as well as to learn from each other from the experiences in the field.
There are two programs dealing with post-secondary education loans that might also interest the teachers in your schools. They are the Teacher Loan Forgiveness Program and Teacher Loan Cancellation Program. In accordance with the Higher Education Act, there are two types of loan forgiveness programs for teachers of private and public schools. These programs are the Teacher Loan Forgiveness for direct subsidized loans, direct unsubsidized loans, subsidized federal Stafford loans, and unsubsidized federal Stafford loans, and the Teacher Cancellation for federal Perkins loans. To learn more about these programs, we encourage you to visit the program websites for additional information. In particular, if you have direct subsidized loans, direct unsubsidized loans, subsidized federal student loans, or unsubsidized federal Stafford loans, you may be eligible for teacher loan forgiveness. Now, let me turn it over to Pamela to address statistical trends and other data from the U.S. Department of Education's research arm.
Thanks, Maureen. Private school students and teachers are involved in many survey and assessment programs of the U.S. Department of Education's National Center for Educational Statistics. And many of you are familiar with the NAEP, the National Assessment for Education Progress, which is also known as the nation's report card. And this assessment measures the educational progress of both public and private school students in America. And private school students also participate in a number of longitudinal studies that follow cohorts of students over a period of years. Many of the stats that you'll see in today's presentation come from the Private School Universe Survey, or PSS. And the PSS is run biennially and collects data on school characteristics such as enrollment, affiliation, staffing, and other data comes from the studies that private school teachers and principals are asked to participate in, such as National Teacher and Principal Survey, which was formerly known as the School and Staffing Survey. To give you a framework for private school education in America, let's review a snapshot of statistics related to private education in our country. And these data come from the Private School Universe Survey. In the fall of 2017, there were 32,461 private elementary and secondary schools. Of that, 7,047 were Catholic schools, which made up 21% of all private schools in America. And the percentage of elementary and secondary students who were enrolled in private schools decreased from 11% in the fall of 1999 to 10% in fall 2017. And about 66% of private school students attend religious schools, of which 40% are Catholic and 34% are non-sectarian schools. This figure shows the number of private school students decreased from 6 million in the fall of 1999 to 5.7 million in the fall of 2017. And the number of private school students enrolled in Catholic schools decreased from 2.7 million in fall 1999 to 2.1 million in the fall of 2017. And these are the latest data that we have, as the next set of data are due out in, that next set is due out in 2022. The number of students enrolled in other religious schools in the fall of 2017, though, was not measurably different from the number enrolled in the fall of 1999. There were about 2.2 million students in each. And the number of students enrolled in non-sectarian schools was actually higher in the fall of 2017, 1.4 million students, than in the fall of 1999, which was 1.2 million students. Now we'll talk a little bit about the nation's report card, the National Assessment for Educational Progress, or NAEP, which is the largest continuing and nationally representative assessment of what our nation's students know and can do in various subjects. In private schools, students have participated in NAEP since its inception. So in order to have a complete picture of the academic progress of our nation's students, participation of private schools is necessary. And in order to publish results, the private school subgroup must have a 70% participation rate. And in the past few years, this participation rate was not always met, and thus the department has not been able to report the national private school results. That said, although the overall participation rate among Catholic schools has fallen over the years, Catholic schools have indeed met the 70% participation rate, and thus the department has been able to publish findings for Catholic school students, even in cases where we cannot report on the national private school results. So the national and state NAEP are given in reading and math every 2 years, and in science and writing normally every 4 years. And many national private schools organizations like NCEA have encouraged their members' schools to participate in the NAEP. And OMP strongly recommends and supports that you continue participating in order to ensure that the published results show a complete picture of our nation's students' performance. And in February 2021, the National Center for Educational Statistics launched the NAEP 2021 School Survey, which surveyed approximately 3,500 schools each month from February through June at grades 4 and 8. And with the participation of educators and school leaders across the country, the survey provides data on instructional modes and attendance rates starting in March through the end of the 2020-2021 school year. The survey was conducted in accordance with the executive order on supporting the reopening and continuing operation of schools and early childhood providers. So that executive order mandates the director of the Institute for Education Science collect the data necessary to fully understand the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on schools, including the status of in-person learning at schools across the country. So there is new data available as of July 8th on the school survey dashboard on the NAEP website, and this data provides insights into learning opportunities offered by schools during the pandemic. And results from this new pilot survey will also be available for analyzing the 2022 NAEP data. And that data provides crucial contextual information for understanding the 2022 NAEP assessment results. So you might be wondering what kind of data is generated from the 2021 school survey. The data shown here comes from a screenshot of the results of the survey and shows the different types of instructional modes offered by public and private schools. And 3 modes included are remote, hybrid, of remote and in-person learning. As you can see, 93% of all private schools surveyed were open for in-person learning during the 2020-2021 school year. And breaking the private schools group down a bit further, you can see that 92% of Catholic schools were open for in-person learning. This is compared to 63% of the public schools and 59% of charter schools. And now I'd like to share some specific data about Catholic schools with you from one of the longitudinal studies. This slide provides data from the Education Longitudinal Study of 2002, or ELS 2002. Which is an example of the types of analysis that can be run using high school longitudinal data. When the data are originally released from a survey collection, the department releases something called a first look report, which is a brief set of findings usually containing key outcomes from the study. For the high school studies, these tend to be things like planning for college, high school completion, post-secondary enrollment, and information about careers. So this figure, which is from the ELS 2002 second follow-up first look, uses data collected 2 years after most students completed high school to show differences in timing of post-secondary enrollment by school type. Overall, what you'll see is that regardless of high school type, a majority of high school students enrolled in post-secondary education immediately after high school. Those are in the purple bars. Comparing them, you can see that more sophomores who went to Catholic schools, 90%, and other private schools, 84% were enrolled in post-secondary education at higher rates 4 years later than public school sophomores, which was 58%. And now let's look at how post-secondary attainment differ by types of high schools. In this figure, also using the ELS 2002 data, again looking at the purple bars, a higher percentage of students from Catholic schools, 62%, and other private schools, 57%, had attained a bachelor's degree or higher 10 years later, compared to public school students at 31%. Now, looking at the yellow bars, we see the pattern for which types of students had enrolled in post-secondary education by 10 years later. A lower percentage of students from Catholic schools, 2%, and other private schools, 4%, had not received any post-secondary education as of 10 years later than public school students, which was 17%. Another survey program that private school professionals participate in is what we now call the National Teacher and Principal Survey Program, or NTPS. NTPS is the redesign of what was known as the Schools and Staffing Survey, and which began in the late 1980s to provide data about the K-12 workforce and the teacher supply and demand. The first SAS was in 1987-88 and included a teacher follow-up survey, a TFS, the next year. The TFS and related principal follow-up surveys, PFS, continued through SAS and into the NTPS. So the final SAS collection was during the 2011-12 school year, and then it underwent a redesign to the NTPS in 2015-16. So the NTPS included private schools for the first time in the 2017-2018 school year. The NTPS coordinated surveys of schools, principals, and teachers with follow-up surveys of principals and teachers in select collections. And it began with a 2 to 3 year cycle starting in 2015-16 school year with national representation of public schools. And it expanded in 2017-18 to include private schools and state representative samples of public schools. So the NTPS serves as ED's primary source of information on K-12 schools from the perspectives of teachers and administrators. And additionally, many of the SAS items are included in the NTPS, which allows for continued trend analysis over time. And let's review some findings from the 2017-18 NTPS. This graph shows the average years of experience that principals have. So private school principals report having an average of 9.7 years experience as a principal, whereas public school principals report having 6.8 years of experience. And of which, for private schools, 7 years was the average time spent in their current school, as opposed to public school principals, which report 4.2 years average in their current school. Another interesting finding is that higher percentage of private school principals expressed having major influence over decisions made about 4 out of 7 activities as compared to traditional public school principals. Those areas are establishing curriculum, determining the content of professional development programs for teachers, setting performance standards for students, and setting discipline policy. As for plans for the next NTPS, the upcoming 2023-24 NTPS will include both public and private schools, and the principal follow-up survey and teacher follow-up survey collections are planned for the 2024-25 school year. As you can imagine, though, due to COVID-19, there was a response rate decrease between 2017-18 and 2020-2021 collections, which was expected. Thus, the Catholic school response rates are critical for the future of private school data, and we encourage your schools to respond so that the perspective of the private school principals and teachers is represented. Well, this wraps up the information about private school statistics, and now I'll pass it back to Maureen, who will share our contact information and close out this session.
Thanks, Pamela. Well, we have shared a lot of information about federal education programs and private school statistics in this presentation, and imagine that you might have additional questions yourself. If you need further information or have additional questions, please feel free to contact us via email at onpe@ed.gov or by phone at 202-401-1365. We hope this information has been helpful to your work, and we want to thank you for joining us today. We wish you a very successful school year, and again, thank you for all you do on behalf of your students every day.